Hi everybody, this is Dr. Childs, and in this video I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about guidelines for thesis statements in academic writing. Thesis statements, those all-important sentences in your paper. So let's get to it. First of all, this is what a thesis statement is. A thesis statement is a 1 or 2 sentence summary of your argument. The thesis statement is the most important sentence in the paper. Without a doubt, your paper has got to have a good thesis statement. If it is lacking a good thesis statement, then it probably will not be a successful paper. It certainly is a big grade deduction if there's no thesis statement or a less successful thesis statement, and so you do really want to spend a lot of time thinking about and revising your thesis statement. The thesis should appear at the end of your first paragraph. So it should be the last sentence in your first paragraph. Usually a thesis statement is going to be 1 sentence. You can get it into 2 if you just absolutely have to, but ideally it should be 1. Now, what a thesis does, and this is why it is the most important sentence in your paper. A good thesis should make a claim that can be supported with reasons. In other words, it can't just be an opinion. It can't be a maybe kind of statement. Like if you were analyzing an ad, your thesis statement couldn't be something like, our ad might be successful and it might not be successful. That's not really making a claim. So you have to make a claim, and it has to be one that can be supported with reasons. So a thesis statement like cats are better than dogs is not going to be a good thesis because it can't be supported with reason, right? That's just an opinion that cats are better than dogs, and it's one that many people would disagree with. Now, you could have a thesis statement that was more along the lines of cats are better than dogs for sedentary people who don't like going out for walks. Now, that's a more sensible thesis statement. Or cats are better than dogs for people who live in apartments. Now, those are thesis statements that you could support with reasons. Now, obviously, people could still disagree with them, but you can at least have some reasons to back them up. The claim that's in your thesis should be one that you can support well in the required length of the paper, meaning that your thesis should not be too simplistic, but it shouldn't be too complicated either. It shouldn't be a thesis statement that's so big that you would need a 20-page paper to support it, right? Because you're going to be writing a 3 to 5-page paper. So you need a thesis statement that you can adequately persuade the reader of in 3 to 5 pages. Usually a thesis should have a because clause or a reason why the claim is made. So you do need to give the reader a reason right there in the thesis for accepting that thesis. This is what a thesis should not do. A thesis should never list 3 support points, and you probably have been told before that a thesis should list 3 support points. Well, it is unfortunate that some people are taught that way because it's not really appropriate for college level writing. But learning the 3-point thesis is a good stepping stone. It's like riding a bike with training wheels. It teaches you basically that a paper should have a thesis. But now we're moving on into college writing. You're learning to become a better writer, a college level writer, and you need to get rid of those 3 support points and give them a more elegant thesis statement. A thesis should not be vague. And it also should not be too specific. Sorry to be confusing there. We'll talk about some examples in a minute that will make this a little bit more clear. You don't want your thesis to list a bunch of points or say so much that there's almost no point in reading the rest of the paper. But at the same time, it shouldn't be so vague that the reader has no idea why you're making the claim that you're making. Obviously, the thesis should never have errors in grammar, spelling, or punctuation. No sentence in your paper should have those errors, but it is particularly important in the thesis. And the reason for that is that since this is the most important sentence in your paper, it just is very it makes a very bad impression if the most important sentence of your paper is sloppy. A thesis should also not make an announcement, like, in this paper I will. Now, knowing those things, what is wrong with these thesis statements? Our poster for Can of Tan is appealing. Clearly, this thesis is too vague. It doesn't tell you why the poster is appealing. It makes a claim that the poster is appealing, but it doesn't give you any kind of reason, any kind of because clause. Second one, a reader flipping through Vogue would notice that our ad is successful. Now, this is a little bit more specific in that you know that the ad would appear in Vogue. And the thesis makes a claim that the reader would see the ad and would immediately be caught by it and think it's successful. But still, it's a little bit too vague because it doesn't say why the ad is successful. Our commercial for Club Pick Me Up makes the club look cool, cheap, and popular. Well, obviously the problem with this one is it lists 3 points. What about this one? Our ad for Veggie Tales restaurant uses ethos, logos, and pathos to convince the potential diner that out of all the vegetarian restaurants in the Houston area, ours is the most committed to green and healthful practices. All right. Now you might think, well, that's very specific. It gives a reason. So what's the problem here? The problem is that to support this thesis, what would you have to do? You would have to compare Veggie Tales restaurant to all the vegetarian restaurants in the Houston area to show that Veggie Tales is the most committed to green and healthful practices. So that is not something that you could effectively do in 3 to 5 pages. Now, this is Houston. There aren't that many vegetarian restaurants, but still this is too broad a topic for a paper, too big a topic for the length of paper that you will be writing. Here's a better one. Our commercial for USA Motors lures in potential customers by providing them with a sense of security. So this thesis tells you that the ad is successful, but it doesn't do it in such clunky language, like this ad is successful or this ad is not successful. It says it lures in potential customers. So it's working. And how does it lure them in? By providing them with a sense of security. So this is what I mean by not being too vague and not being too specific. In this thesis statement, you are not listing points. You are not spelling out the whole argument for the reader. You are simply explaining that the most important thing about your ad, that it gives customers a sense of security. When you are writing a thesis for a rhetorical analysis, which is what you will all be doing for your group project, this is the process that you want to go through. First of all, determine who the audience is, the audience of the advertisement. Determine what the message of the text is. Decide how the text uses rhetorical appeals to communicate that message or persuade its reader. Hopefully you've already started thinking about this in your group since you worked on your ad in Module 3. And so hopefully you've thought about this already, but before you come up with a thesis statement, you definitely need to decide how it uses the rhetorical appeals. In a sentence or two, make a claim about that rhetoric. Is the text effective? Why? Why does it rely on 1 or 2 appeals to the exclusion of the others, if it does? Why does it use all the appeals? Why would it catch the customer's eye? Why would it convince the customer? Answering the following questions will help. Is the argument of the text convincing to the audience? Yes or no? Why or why not? Now, if you just cannot get a thesis together for this assignment, and it is difficult, I grant you that, it is difficult, then just answer these questions. Is the argument of the text convincing? Yes or no? And then you say why it is convincing or why it is not convincing. Remember, the thesis should argue for your interpretation, not just describe or summarize the text. So, it would not be effective if this thesis statement said, Our commercial for USA Motors lures in potential customers by using ethos, logos, and pathos because, first of all, that lists 3 points. Second of all, it doesn't tell you how it's using ethos, logos, and pathos. Notice that this thesis statement answers the question, is the ad effective? Yes, it lures in customers. Why is it effective? It provides them a sense of security. All right, now I know this is difficult stuff. Rhetorical analysis is always challenging, especially when you're first learning it. So, by all means, feel free to drop me a message if you have any questions or concerns.